Wonderful. Welcome. A huge welcome to everyone to the Australian Business Group International Women's Day. We're so glad to have everyone join us. I can't tell you how excited I am about this event and to have these three incredible ladies here speaking with us on the theme of impact. And certainly one of the silver linings of the current situation is the ability to host a really far-reaching, geographically far-reaching group of ladies. Very proud to have Dr. Jane Goodall, founder of the Jane Goodall Institute and UN Messenger of Peace, who's dialing in from the UK. We have Jessica Smith, who's a diversity advocate and former Paralympian based here with us and a well-known part of the Australian community within the UAE. And we also have Jennifer Gersbeck, a global advocate for the Fred Hollows Foundation, dialing in from Melbourne in Australia. So very, very excited, and it's going to be a great hour of understanding impact and inspiration to further our own impact on the world. So firstly, a quick introduction for myself. My name is Kate Mittoon. I'm a board member of the Australian Business Group. I'm also the managing director and founder of a marketing agency called Acorn Strategy. And for those who don't know the Australian Business Group, our mission is to connect Australians to business and business to Australians in the UAE. So this means content and opportunities, and all of that wouldn't be possible without the support of our sponsors. So thank you to Aquarius Global, Global Victoria, Acorn Strategies, Servcorp, and also our partners CPA Australia and the Australian Pavilion for Expo 2020 Dubai. So today we have three exceptional women who have had a great impact on the world, and I couldn't think of a more fitting panel for International Women's Day around the theme of impact. So we have three ladies who are from very different backgrounds: sport, conservation, and business. So whilst I do have three bios here, but I don't want to spend my time talking about Jennifer, Jane, and Jessica. I'd rather talk to them, but I'd be remiss if I didn't do a brief introduction on the incredible impact that each of them has had. So firstly, Dr. Jane, widely considered to be the world's foremost expert on chimpanzees, and she's been studying these mammals for more than 60 years and is a global household name thanks to her tireless work in animal conservation, animal and environmental conservation. She established the Jane Goodall Institute in 1977 and in 2020 vowed to plant 5 million trees as part of the World Economic Forum's 1 Trillion Tree Initiative. In 2019, she was named by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. She's written 26 books, 11 of them specifically for children, and was also named the UN Messenger for Peace in 2002. So Jane's impact is obviously immense, and through her life's work and campaigning, she has mobilized the collective power of individuals globally to help save and preserve the natural world that we inhabit and we share with countless species. She continues her activism and provides inspiration to people of all generations around the world, and not least in the UAE through her Roots and Shoots program and work with the environmental agency Abu Dhabi. So thank you so much, Jane. Thanks for joining us today. It would be great to hear in your own words what impact means to you. You've clearly made a huge impact through your work, and inspiring the generations is something that you advocate for. Can you tell us a bit more about that and what impact is for you?
Well, yes, thank you. And first of all, I really wouldn't say I was the world's expert on chimpanzees, because since 1986, I've been traveling the world and raising awareness about the problems that threaten chimpanzees and everybody else. So we have incredible students studying chimpanzees and professors. But the research at Gombe continues. Began in 1960. We just celebrated our 60th anniversary, and we're still learning new things about the chimpanzees, part of which has been the importance of the female in chimpanzee society. So since this is International Women's Day, I thought I would like to acknowledge the role that female chimpanzees play in their society too. So, okay, well, the impact, let me stick to the impact in the area around the Gombe National Park to start with, because I started off in this tiny, oops, sorry about that. I started off in this very small national park, and it's only 35 square kilometers. And it was, when I began in 1960, it was part of the whole equatorial forest belt that stretched right across to West Africa. By the late 1980s, when I flew over, I was shocked to see a tiny little area of forest surrounded by completely bare hills, more people living there than the land could support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere, basically struggling to survive. And that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find ways of living without destroying the environment, we can't save chimpanzees, forests, or people either. So that's when the Jane Goodall Institute began our Take Care, or Takari, as it's known, program. And it began in 1994. And it was very holistic from the start. It began when we went into the villages and asked the people what they thought. And it wasn't me, it wasn't a bunch of arrogant white people going into these very poor Tanzanian villages. It was local people, carefully selected, 7 of them, who'd been working in NGOs in forestry, agriculture, health, and so on. And they didn't have PhDs, so they were no threat. And they went in and talked to the people in the villages. And so we started off with what they wanted, more food, but they also wanted better health and education facilities. So we worked with the local Tanzanian authorities, whose job it was to do that, and we upped that with grants from outside. Then I had the great good fortune of being invited by Mohammed Yunus to go to Bangladesh. And he introduced me to the women who, for the very first time, some of them, had actually held any money in their hand. And he said their hands trembled. And when they told me what it was like before they had this incredible opportunity of taking out tiny loans for a project which they wanted to do, they started to cry, the difference between then and now. And so I thought, this is exactly what we need around Gombe. So we've got 8 little microcredit branches. Men can take out a tiny loan, but it's mostly women. And it's based on the social pressure system that Eunice started. So there are 5 women. They can be joined by 2 men. And they all have to pay back their loans before the next loans can be made. And the advantage of this, and it's nearly all women, the advantage is that if you just hand out money, they use it up and put their hand out for more. If it's a loan and they pay back, they are so proud. So we've seen an absolute huge increase in the number of women starting small businesses, and it's spread far, far beyond the original 12 villages. And then the next thing we did was to get loans, to get grants, to keep girls in school during and beyond puberty, to give them a chance of secondary education, to try and lift them out of the rut into which they had fallen, the rut of reaching the age when they're supposed to get married, and then their job is just to have children and cook and work the fields. So we found that in order to help these women, girls, stay in school, well, we had to provide hygienic latrines. They just had dirty holes in the ground, no privacy. So when they reached puberty and started menstruating, they wouldn't go to school. And we discovered that, they also needed sanitary towels. And then one child said, yes, but if we don't have knickers, we can't keep them on, these pads. So it became, it spread out from watching chimps to empowering women. But I want to end these few remarks by saying that I was lucky enough to meet a chief from one of the South American tribes. I regret to say, I forget which country it was, but he was an indigenous leader. And I was so impressed when he said, you know, Jane, we see our tribe as like an eagle. One wing is male, the other wing is female. And we know that only when those two wings are equal will our tribe fly high.
That's amazing, Dr. Jane, and so great to hear your perspective on of impact in your own words. And obviously, your impact is far greater reaching than that as well. But I think just the story of empowering people and inspiring people to be able to sustain that momentum is really powerful. Next, I'm going to move to Jessica Smith, who has a really great story of empowerment from a different perspective, and that's one of sharing her own experiences and advocating diversity as well. As I mentioned earlier, Jessica is a really well-known member of the Australian community in the UAE and a great leader as a diversity advocate globally. She's perhaps best known for representing Australia in competition swimming for 7 years, and she competed at the 2004 Paralympic Games in Athens, Greece. She was born without a left forearm, and when just 18 months old, she sustained third-degree burns to 15% of her body. So her life is a story is a story of tribulation and triumph. She's used that as fuel to become an internationally renowned advocate for diversity, tolerance, and inclusion. She's also authored a book, Little Miss Jessica Goes to School for Children with Disabilities, and she was awarded the Order of Australia Medal in 2019. She's highly accomplished academically with studies in population health, gender diversity, and currently writing a PhD application. She was awarded Pride of Australia Medal in 2017 and was named Cosmopolitan Magazine Woman of the Year in the category of Game Changer. So again, a great story of impact, and by being completely open about her own painful experiences in both physical and mental health, she's helped countless people around the world who are confronted with similar issues, and in the UAE as well. I think that's particularly useful. Some mental and physical disabilities are really frowned upon and a bit of a taboo subject, so that's been really groundbreaking here as well. So just through your work and your journey making an impact, you talk a lot about gender diversity and have had some great observations yourself throughout the pandemic in that regard. Do you want to talk to us a little bit more about your background and also your views on gender diversity?
Yeah, certainly. Well, thank you so much for having me. It is an honour and privilege to share this space with three remarkable women. For me, when we talk about impact, you know, it's how we can influence or have an effect on people, communities, and society at large. And as you know, you shared a little bit about my story. I was born missing my left arm and then sustained a scalding accident when I was a toddler. I grew up looking very different to what society portrayed to be, you know, normal. And from as young as I can remember, I struggled with this social identity of who I was and why I looked the way that I did. So a lot of questions about my appearance. And, you know, unfortunately, my parents weren't able to answer a lot of those questions. So this journey that I was on was a family journey as well. And what is interesting for me is when we talk about impact, it can obviously be both negative and positive. When I was growing up, there was a lot of negative dialogue being used to describe who I was and what I might or might not be able to achieve when I was, you know, an adult or a teenager. So lots of professionals saying that I was disabled or disformed or disfigured, and using words that had such a negative connotation. And for me, growing up, at every single turn as a female with a disability, I was told that I wasn't strong enough, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't pretty enough, and I simply wasn't good enough. And you begin to believe that, you know, when that's a narrative that's been, you know, discussed around you, not so much to you, but about you, it becomes very hard to break free of that. And I've been wanting to experience a life that practices equality and tolerance, you know, this level of understanding and acceptance, a life free from prejudice and bigotry and discrimination. But it's so hard to break free of that when you are living as part of that minority group. And what I came to discover was that through sport, through using my body and through proving to myself and to society that I wasn't going to be limited by the words and the labels that society had imposed on me, I was able to, I suppose, pave a way for me to express who I was, irrespective of the fact that I had a disability and that I had prominent scars. And sport enabled me to do that. But more importantly, the parallels that I've been able to take from my swimming career and applying to the work that I do now is, I think, what is most important, in the fact that by sharing my vulnerabilities through my struggles with body image and diversity and inclusion and disability, I was able to spark an important conversation about inclusion and about the importance of acceptance. And through using my voice, I enabled other people to feel empowered enough to use theirs. And for me, when we talk about impact and influence, when people can sit in a sincere place of genuine, I guess, truth, my truth, and, you know, Jennifer's truth and Dr. Jane's truth as well, whatever that industry might be, whatever that field might be, if you can sit in a place where you are expressing your truth and you realise that your story is having an impact on others, the flip side to that is then taking on the responsibility to continue that journey. And I think that's been the most significant, profound thing for me, is to realise that through sharing some of the complexities of my story and the struggles of my stories, I've given other people the chance to use their own voice. And we know that through sharing our stories and giving each other the opportunity to communicate about issues, and in particular for women, then we demystify some of the struggles. And so for me, it was realizing that it wasn't just about me and my story, but it was about everybody else and their stories, and knowing that for so many women, especially in developing countries, they simply do not have the resources to give themselves their own voice. So how can I use the resources that are available to me to benefit others? And, you know, it's about campaigning, and it's about writing and speaking and doing whatever I can to continue the conversation, knowing that if it helps just one other person to feel empowered enough to use their own voice, then that's going to create that ripple effect, which we're seeing. And at the moment, you know, COVID and the crisis that we're all faced with, the unpredictability and the uncertainty, has seen gender equality move further and further away. And I think we're at a turning point right now of where we have an opportunity to really make a change, to dismantle the structures and the systems that are in place and create a new future path and an end goal when it comes to gender equality. And I think we can speed it up, but it's a matter of now and making sure that everybody is part of the conversation in order to make sure that we take those next steps, and we can trust that the next steps after that are going to evolve, even though we might not be able to see it right now.
You're on mute, Kate. I can't hear you.
Thank you. Sorry, it wouldn't be a conference call without someone being on mute, so got that one out of the way. But I think it's great to hear the common themes coming out there, and I know Jennifer was nodding away there when you're talking about, you know, using the pandemic as a launch pad really to help break some of these cycles that we're in, and you know, really using that as a platform to create better change. But so moving on to Jennifer, who is also a great advocate of people within developing countries and developing societies who need support. Jennifer is the Director of Global Partnerships and Advocacy at the Fred Hollows Foundation, and previously the CEO of Vision 2020 Australia. She's been involved in a wide range of impactful campaigns, raising awareness and changing behaviour and influencing key decision makers. She joined Vision 2020 Australia as the CEO in 2004, and this was her first step into eye health. She's secured an amazing $68 million in overseas aid to the Asia Pacific under the Avoidable Blindness Initiative. And she's contributed to halving the rate of blindness and vision impairment amongst Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians between 2008 and 2016. She also champions gender equity and is co-chair of the Gender Equity Work Group. and has been instrumental in proving poor eye health is a gender issue, with more women suffering than men due to cultural norms in Indigenous Australians and other countries. So her impact is far-reaching, and in her roles in both Vision 2020 Australia and through the Fred Hollows Foundation, her impact has been felt around the world. She's secured enormous funding and successfully pressured governments to treat eye health seriously, in turn saving countless people from avoidable blindness and helping some of the world's most underprivileged communities. So I'll hand over to you, Jennifer, to hear a little bit more about what impact means to you and what those significant milestones have been that have helped you to be able to achieve that.
Thanks, Kate. And again, it's such an honour to be on the panel alongside yourself, Dr. Jane and Jessica. And also on behalf of the Fred Hollows Foundation, I would like to thank the Australian Business Group of Abu Dhabi for putting together this webinar and inviting us to participate and shed some light on gender inequity and vision loss. So what does impact mean to me? Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been concerned about social justice. I struggled with the idea that there were people who, through no fault of their own, just didn't have the same opportunities as others from a very early age. As a young woman, in fact, this sort of led to an interest in politics and public policy. And early on, my ambition was to become the first female Prime Minister of Australia. But that sort of missed that boat there. This passion for social justice really shaped and influenced my career path, which has had a few significant turning points, and all of them centred around impact in some way or another. So my early career was in state government, working in health and community services. And while I worked on some really interesting programs and campaigns, after a while, I just started to feel like a very small cog in a large wheel, and just too far removed from seeing the impact of my actions. So my first turning point was when I saw an advertisement from World Vision Australia for a marketing role that really tugged at my heartstrings. Here was an opportunity for me to tackle global poverty and have a real impact. I spent 4 years travelling to Africa and Asia, witnessing firsthand the suffering of people living in abject poverty. And I often felt completely helpless. So many problems, so hard to fix. I sort of found myself asking the question, where do I begin? And I guess that's where eye health comes in, because eye health really showed me where to begin. And this marked another major turning point in my career. I was keen to sort of take that next leadership step, and when an opportunity arose to become CEO of a small advocacy organisation focused on eye health, which was Vision 2020 Australia, even though initially the role was only for a 12-month period, I took the leap and I've never looked back. It really didn't take that long for me to realise that, unlike many seemingly intractable problems, eliminating avoidable blindness is achievable and can deliver significant economic and social impact for individuals, communities, and entire countries with a relatively modest investment. Also, the instantaneous outcome from restoring sight is just truly inspirational. However, the magnitude of the problem is big. Globally, at least 2.2 billion people are blind or vision impaired, and around half are needlessly so. Their vision loss could be prevented or treated. Importantly, the burden of the problem, or the burden of eye conditions and vision impairment, is not borne equally. Of the 1.1 billion people who are needlessly blind, 609 million are women and 497 million are men. So that's 55% are women, and most live in low and middle income countries. The thing is that vision impairment and blindness have far-reaching implications, not just for the women affected, but also for their families and their communities. In industrialised countries, this is largely because women live longer than men, but in low and middle income countries where cataract is responsible for most of the blindness, it's often because women do not get to access services with the same frequency as men. It's also worth noting that vision is more than just a health issue. It impacts education, productivity, employability, road safety, of course, equity and quality of life. In many ways, it's the golden thread running through the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And at the Foundation, together with other eye health organisations, we're really working hard to position eye health as an economic, social and development issue. So I've worked in the eye health sector now for almost 16 years, and the last 5 at the Fred Hollows Foundation. And over this time, my commitment to prevent avoidable blindness and vision impairment globally has only deepened. I share the Foundation's belief that no one should be needlessly blind. Imagine what it would be like to lose your ability to see, unable to participate in the workforce or maintain your livelihood, lose your independence, not be able to see the faces of your loved ones, your children struggling to learn or navigate their way through life. This is the reality for over 1 billion people in the world today. It's a reality that's unnecessary and unacceptable. So in summing up, what does impact mean to me? Personally, it means taking career risks, backing yourself and being brave. I think holding on to the passion and belief that what you do every single day matters. And as the saying goes, be the change that you want to see. And when it comes to eye health, it means ending avoidable blindness by ensuring that all people, men and women equally, have access to high quality and affordable eye care. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. It's great to hear, and I think just hearing that impact, and I know also from personal interactions with the Fred Hollows Foundation just how easy it is to to be able to make donations and to have an immediate impact for relatively small amounts as well. And actually had my own kids fundraising to contribute money at a barbecue recently. But I think having that impact and making sure that that there is, there's easy access to it is really important. I think there's been so many themes that have been common that have come up through listening to the three of you speak. I think one of the probably the more pressing things that we're facing at the moment is the challenge our impact can have during the challenge of making an impact rather through the pandemic, and what how has that set us back. And it would be great to hear, how the Jane Goodall Institute has managed to keep up some of those programs, or what the challenges have been during the pandemic, and likewise hear from Jennifer and Jessica further about what some of the setbacks we've had as a result of the pandemic, and what opportunities there are to change things around. Dr. Jane, did you want to comment first?
Yes, fine. And I think I need you, Jennifer, because I've got something funny with my eye. So if I look as if I'm
Are you okay?
Yes, I'm okay. But if I look down, it's because, I don't know, it's hurting. So I need you. Anyway, through the pandemic, the Jane Goodall Institute, there are 25 of them around the world. And one of our main programs is empowering young people, both male and female, because as I was traveling the world after I left Gombe to try and do more advocacy, to try and heal some of the harm that we wealthy nations have inflicted on the poorer nations through years of colonialism and exploitation, which is still going on today with some of the big corporations. Anyway, I was finding many young people who seemed to have little hope for the future, and they were either angry, depressed, or just apathetic. And I talked to them in all different continents. They said more or less the same: you've compromised our future, there's nothing we can do about it. So yes, we have been stealing the future of young people, and we still are, but it's not true that there's nothing that can be done. So it was in 1991 that I started our Roots and Shoots program with the main message, which is what you just said, Jennifer. The main message of our Roots and Shoots is every individual matters, and every individual makes an impact every single day. And if we're fortunate, if we're not living in abject poverty, we have a choice as the kind of difference that we can make. We decided from the beginning that as everything is interrelated in this planet, that each group of Roots and Shoots would choose 3 projects, but they choose themselves. They would be empowered to sit and talk and decide what it was they wanted to do to make the world a better place. But they should choose between them a project to help people, a project to help animals, a project to help the environment. So what started with 12 high school students from 8 schools in Tanzania is now in 68 countries, with thousands of those who've been through the program, and somehow they attain values in Roots and Shoots that they keep throughout life. So I should say that this probably is the biggest impact that I've made, along with helping science to renegade on its previous position that they told me when I went to Cambridge, that there was a sharp line dividing us from the rest of the animal kingdom. The difference was one of kind, not degree. And I knew this was wrong because I was taught by my childhood teacher, the dog you see behind me. But then one more thing I want to say, which doesn't totally answer your question, but I think it's very important, that when I was growing up, all those years ago, I'm going to be 87 in a few weeks. When I was growing up, I was 10 years old when I decided, after reading Tarzan, there was no television back there, only books, and that I would grow up, go to Africa, live with wild animals and write books about them. Everybody laughed. How will you do that? Africa's far away, you don't have money, and you're just a girl. Well, luckily my mother never said that. She said, if there's something you really want like this, you're going to have to work awfully hard, take advantage of every opportunity, and then if you don't give up, you may find a way. And that's the message I've taken around the world, particularly in disadvantaged groups, not just in the developing world. Think of the disadvantaged groups in the United States. The terrible poverty in some of the inner cities, the crippling poverty in the Native American reservations. So I wish my mother was alive to know how many people have come up to me and said, Jane, I really want to thank you because you taught me, because you did it, I can do it too.
What they see is what they believe they can do. So that's incredible to see. And so, Jessica, I know you have some thoughts on how the pandemic has changed things as well, and just that divide.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is, I suppose, a highlight of the power imbalances that exist within our own personal relationships. And I think women have disproportionately been disadvantaged again, especially working mothers, when it comes to the expectation that they will then take on more roles at home. And statistics show us loud and clear that more women have lost their jobs in the last 12 months, but more women are also having to choose to leave their jobs to stay at home. And although that might seem like a choice for many people, when all the other choices are taken away, it's actually not a choice. And we're seeing a lot more people identify with this social identity threat. And that's where women are put into a position where they feel that they perhaps can't take on a role that they believe they deserve because of the psychological aspects that society imposes on them, so that they don't deserve to be in a role that's male dominated, that they should be staying at home because that's what their role is and that's the expectation. Perhaps they aren't earning as much as their partner, so therefore they need to be the people staying at home taking care, whether it's children, whether it's their household. And so often we see that women are making choices to take roles that are beneath them or to make decisions that they really want to make, but because the psychological and the emotional burden is far too challenging for them to carry. And so it was so interesting at the beginning of lockdown here, I began gender diversity studies at NCAD, and it was fascinating. My husband was at home during the same time during the lockdown, and he just assumed the home office, and I just assumed the kitchen table. I have 3 young children, so I was rocking my youngest in the rocker at my feet, and the other 2 was literally jumping all over me. And I was like, the irony here is absolutely incredible. But what we have to appreciate is the cultural influences, societal influences, our upbringing, everything that's been so ingrained in what we have come to understand about male and female roles. And I think now it's time we start to unlearn a lot of what we have been taught. And in doing, though, that we have to break down the systems. If we truly want to live in a world that practices inclusivity and that champions diversity, then it's the systems, it's the structures, it's the discourse, it's the narrative. And this is a huge stage of change and transition. And unfortunately, we are the ones who need to get uncomfortable. We are the ones that have to go through phases of things that are going to be awkward and things where we feel like, what's the point of all of this? And I think when we talk about companies, for example, I've worked with a lot of organisations where senior leadership, they do understand, they seem to get that gender equality is good for society, it's good for the economy. But as we filter down, the message seems to be becoming a little bit lost. And I think what we're seeing is gender fatigue. Right? Here we are again on International Women's Day having the same conversations, and we don't seem to be making any ground. And I think what happens is, for a large part of society, men and women, we want to know what's in it for us. And when statistics are coming out and saying that gender equality, gender parity is 100 years away, people tend to lose motivation. So I think we have to adjust, whether it's in the workforce, the KPIs, so that individuals feel like they're part of the solution. And then on societal levels, like we're all saying, be part of the conversation, call out inequality, say, I have a story to tell, I want my voice to be heard. And I think listening to Jennifer and to Jane and to yourself, Kate, what we also need to differentiate is where the inequality lies. We talk about, education for young women. A lot of that's being rolled out online at the moment. And the reality is that half the population are not online, and the majority of those are female. So we're seeing female students being disadvantaged once again because they don't have access to the resources. So now more than ever, we say, well, what can we do? How can we speed this up? How can we make real change? Right now is when we have an opportunity. We either take 10 steps back, or we start taking those little steps forward and trust that the next steps are going to come to fruition. And we have to do that in many ways with a leap of faith and paying it forward. As Jane was saying, how do we encourage the next generation to be a part of this change when for them, they may not ever see equality? That's very, very challenging. It's a heavy burden to carry. But for me, I look back at my mother and my grandmother and all the trailblazers who have got us to where we are now. We have to have a sense of gratitude and a sense of, it's worth it. It's all worth it in the end for my daughter, for her daughter, for my great-grandchildren, because changes have been made. It doesn't happen overnight. We have to be part of this huge transition. And the reality is it's going to take a long time. But if we don't start now, we're going to keep pushing ourselves further and further back. And that is a genuine fear. But again, sometimes we overlook the most simplest answer. And for me, that is just starting to talk more and to use, the social media platforms, anything, to be able to say, okay, we're not going to back down. We have to keep plowing forward.
Absolutely. No, I think you're spot on with a lot of those things there. And I think power balance is a big part of it. And I think, the work around the differences between the haves and the have-nots. And Dr. Jane, I know you've done quite a bit around that. You talk quite a bit about that as well. And, I think that when you're talking about access to education and access to healthcare and all of these things that provide equality, it's really important to look at the divide, not just within our own community, but across the globe as well. Actually, so I'm just going to jump back to Dr. Jane, because you said something before about chimpanzees and their role in society. I wonder if there's anything that we can take from them about, how we construct more equal societies.
Well, it's fascinating because it's very clear in chimp society that males are dominant. They're bigger, stronger, they're more aggressive, they patrol the territory. Their job is to protect the resources for their females and young. So we look at the long history of human evolution and see that we and the chimps have the same kind of social structure. And when I said the females play an important role, in chimp society, there are good and bad mothers. And the good mothers are like my mother. They support their young, even if they're low ranking. If their child gets into a squabble with the child of a higher ranking female and starts to scream, that low ranking mother will rush to protect the child, even though she must know she'll probably be beaten up by the mother of the other mother. And we can now look back over 60 years and we can see that the offspring of those supportive mothers, who are usually also affectionate, they're protective but not overprotective. And by the way, they don't punish their small infants, they distract them. And we now see that those infants grow up to the males reach a higher position in the hierarchy, probably sire more infants, the females are better mothers. So although it might not seem it at first glance, those females are playing a very, very important role. They have their own dominance hierarchy. They're not particularly subdued by the males, and they seem to have a pretty good life. Then, of course, we come along. We have developed language. We've got an intellect that far outstrips that of any other animal, although animals are way more intelligent than we used to think. I mean, even octopuses have this amazing brain. Well, actually, brains in all their arms, as well as in their head. But, you know, we've designed a rocket that went up to Mars and a robot that took photographs, and we know we don't want to live there. And so it's bizarre that this most intellectual creature is destroying its only planet. And there seems to be a disconnect between the clever head and the human heart, which is love and compassion. But, you know, it's interesting about this, the two roles of men and women in our society. And we also have to look at it from the point of view of the child. So what I've learned from chimpanzees over the years is that those first 2 years of life, what's important...
That's my dog.
I thought so. Well, that's nice. My favorite animal is a dog, so he should be there. Anyway, those first 2 years of life, and I'm thinking now of all the little orphans that we look after whose mothers have been shot for bushmeat. The key thing is to have up to 3, maybe 4 adults, or it could be an older sibling, who are always there, who support that child. So when we're thinking about, you know, the female in the workplace, in society today, we have at the same time to ensure that the first couple of years of our children's life, they are given that support network that is so important for good development, along with a relationship with the natural world. Those two things are absolutely key, I believe, for developing a healthy, well-adjusted groups to take on from us when we're gone. I'll be gone before any of you, but we'll all be gone sometime. And we want to leave a better world in all respects for our children, grandchildren, and theirs.
Indeed, I think there's that's really interesting, the role of the family unit versus, you know, the role of individuals in each other's lives as well. We've spoken a little bit there about the haves and the have-nots, the pandemic, and then that role of the family unit as well. It'd be great to hear how that touches on eye health, Jennifer, and what, you know, what trends we're seeing at the moment, or what the pandemic has meant.
Thanks, Kate. I'm just fascinated listening to Dr. Jane. I could just listen to her for hours. Yeah, I think, I mean, specifically about the Fred Hollows Foundation, obviously COVID-19 has impacted program delivery just because we cannot get into a number of countries. But where we can get in, we are working closely with our partners, which are usually ministries of health, to ensure that services are COVID safe and so forth. I mean, it was interesting. I was speaking to the country manager from Bangladesh recently, and that's a country where they're got COVID quite well under control, and service delivery is again in practice. But she said that access to services for women has been impacted even further, and this touches on your point, Jessica, because men now are also in the home. Women's responsibilities have been expanded even further, and so access, which was poor in the first place, is even worse now because of that. So there are some shifts that we sort of really need to address. But I would like to also touch on a few things that you said, Jessica, because they so resonate with me. I mean, we always knew that inequity existed before the onset of COVID, but as you said, you know, we've got this sort of opportunity now. We've got a global pause in many ways, and it presents us with this great opportunity to really create a better and more equitable world as we emerge out of this crisis. And I read an article recently, which was a World Health Organization article on gender and equity analysis of the global health and social workforce. And basically a key message that emerged was that in general, women deliver global health and men lead it. And it stated that health systems will be stronger when the women who deliver them have an equal say in the design of national health plans, policies and systems. And of course, we know that men need to be allies of gender equity, but they too will be the beneficiaries of stronger health systems. And we know that if women are at the table making those decisions, and this is where I think in terms of as we come out of COVID, I feel so passionately about the need for women to be at every conversation and have that equal voice as we start to shape the future that we want to create, this equal world, hopefully. Build back equal, we say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is almost, you know, this turning point where we have an opportunity to launch off that. I'm conscious that we only have about 10 minutes left. So what I would love to do is just get some views from you about if you were to let everyone, we've got more than 50 people on the call right now, if we had to give people 3 action points of what is it that they can do to turn this around, what do we do to shorten this 99 years to equality into something that can have an impact on this generation, what would that be? So if we start perhaps with Jessica.
Sure. So if it was 3, I think, again, going back to simple basics, how we treat every person in our daily interactions, from the taxi drivers to the baristas. And as adults and as parents, making sure that we're role modeling behaviour that we want our children to enact, because they're going to do what they see us do, not what we say. I think that's really, really important to remember. And then in the professional setting and in friendship settings, again, calling out inequality. You know, we have the opportunity now. Enough is enough of letting things slide under the rug and jokes and derogatory terms. Enough now. You know, I think, you know, aren't we sick of that? We're tired of that. You know, it's getting boring almost. So I think if we can, and like, you know, the words used before, allies, everybody championing diversity, inclusion, equality. And I think that just goes back down to very simply having conversations that matter and making sure that we're calling it out when we see it. And don't overlook the importance of the simplicity of how we can help speed things up. So, you know, often we're looking for leadership, we're looking for the seniors to help guide us. Things are happening there, absolutely. But when it comes to what can we do, we have to start talking about it in a more positive and effective way.
Absolutely. Dr. Jane?
Well, I think, you know, one of the key things we can do, which is what Roots and Shoots emphasizes, is the key word I would say is respect. It was our disrespect of animals and the natural world that not only led to COVID because of the way we treated animals, and they ended up in wildlife markets, which led to COVID-19 and many other zoonotic diseases. But in addition to that, it's led to climate change and loss of biodiversity. So respect people of other cultures, respect for animals, respect for the natural world. And that's a key message of Roots and Shoots. And then secondly, what can we do? And I've gone away from women now. I'm just talking about what can we do to, to create a better world. People don't think about the terrible effect that heavy meat eating is having on the environment. It's not only horribly cruel, these factory farms, when we think that every one of those cows, pigs, goats, and so on, they're individuals with personalities, they're sentient, they feel fear and pain. But in addition to that, the billions of animals have to be fed, huge areas are cleared to grow the grain, masses of fossil fuel used to get the grain to the animals, to the abattoir, meat to the table. Waste water, and water is increasingly scarce in many parts of the world, scarce and polluted. And also all of these animals, especially cows, produce methane, which is a very, very virulent greenhouse gas. So eating less or no meat or going vegan is an enormous benefit to the future that we all care about. And then finally, it was mentioned at the beginning, the Trillion Tree Challenge. Our Roots and Shoots groups and Jane Goodall Institutes have been planting trees for years now. And not only planting trees to restore forests, so indigenous species around the forest, planting trees to help people like the fruit trees, and planting urban trees, because if you go through a big city, what you'll find is you go through the affluent areas, beautiful tree-lined streets, birds up in the trees. You come to a poverty-stricken area, concrete, concrete, concrete. Usually the landfills are there. And that's something to address the inequality that we find, not only among people, but in the places where they live. And again, it's lack of respect. We're not respecting the people who live there. And just like all the animals in the intensive factory farms, these people are individuals. They have their own lives, and we don't listen to them enough, and we don't respect them. And we, just as we talk about saving a species and not the individual animals, so we talk about the Latinos or the blacks or something like that. Terrible lack of respect. That's what's wrong in the planet, and that's what Roots and Shoots is working against. And it's working, they do. And we link up with all other groups who feel the same. And by the way, I forgot to say, it's now preschool, university, everything in between. Hundreds of thousands of groups around the world in these 68 countries. And the most recent...
It's so wonderful to see.
Yeah, it's India, right across India, we're growing.
And it's available in the UAE as well, isn't it? Can you tell us a little bit more about how to get involved in the UAE?
Well, how you get involved in the UAE, it's on I think it's got its own website.
It does, rootsandshoots.ae.
Yes.
Wonderful. So I think we'll make sure that we do a focus on that from OSBG over the next week as well, and make sure that that we push that out, and I think also make sure that we're putting pressure on schools and those within our own networks to make sure that they're aware of it and adopt it as well.
By the way, the UAE is helping enormously. They've just given a very major grant to our organization in the UK. We sort of do both, and Tara Golshan is the one who's really made all this happen with very, very hard work. And don't you find that in all these big organizations, you get key people who just really make the thing fly because of their heart?
Yes.
Head and heart together, human potential achieved.
Completely agree. And I think if I take away anything from what you've said today, Dr. Jane, it's definitely that, and the peace and respect towards other people as well. I think it's hugely important. And so, Jennifer, if you had to tell people, if people could go away and do 3 things today, what would they be?
Well, I think, having women in leadership roles is really how we're going to speed up equality. So women's voices must be heard. They need to have a seat at the table, be in a position of power that is respected, as Dr. Jane says, by others as an equal voice. So I think if there are people in the audience who have the power to make this happen, this is what needs to happen. And the voice of women, I think, it just needs to be loud as well. But I guess on this International Women's Day, if I was going to have like a call to action, thinking about some of the issues that we face at the moment, I would say let's urge global health actors and organisations to really ramp up action to build a fairer, more equitable global health system. And through gender equity and women's leadership, unleash its full potential.
Amazing. Some really powerful words there. I think there's certainly a lot that each of us can do. And I think once we, get out our minds out of our own kind of community or our own echo chamber and really look at what's happening internationally and look at people or animals, the environment, people who are not as well off. If you start looking at the divide, I think it's really, there's a lot of things that you can see that are quite obvious that need to change and we can have an impact on as well. But I think, there is a huge amount of takeaways from everything that we've discussed today, and looking at the inequalities between men and women and that 99-year gap. We all have a voice and we all have the ability to change that. I think there's part of empowering men to be able to be part of that conversation and put their hand up equally. I think recognizing the divide between the haves and have-nots, the divide between men and women, and really just having a great deal of respect for each other to make that change happen as well. I think we can see that there's issues in education and healthcare, and by enabling education and healthcare in people in poorer countries, we're really able to help change some of that divide that's happening as well. But I think Dr. Jane summed it up well before, and I love the quote, there are Indigenous people in Latin America who have a saying that their tribe is like an eagle. One wing is male and one wing is female, and only when the wings are equally strong will their tribe fly high. And this is worth fighting for, and that's why we're all here today having the conversation. And I hope we all walk away from the conversation with being able to empower our tribe to be more balanced, and every act will have an impact as a result. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but people have been posting some really wonderful feedback and comments there. And just a reminder, it's rootsandshoots.ae, and we'll send that out through the AusBG group. And for those who might have missed a part of the session today, we will have the recording live later as well. But a massive, massive thank you to all three of our participants today, Dr. Jane, Jennifer, Jessica. You're incredibly inspiring people. And I know your contribution to today's event will mean that our group will have a greater impact as a result. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you for you too.
Thank you so much.
The three J's.
Yes, indeed. It sounds like a really great force. All right, wonderful. So I'm going to take us off air now, but thank you to everyone who's joined us as well.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.